This week on The Record, deadly shooting. A federal ICE operation turns fatal, setting off protests and calls for impeachment. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski joins us from Washington. War powers. President Donald Trump turns on a MAGA Missouri Republican. Why Venezuela could become a dividing line in the 2028 race to replace Trump at the top of the ticket. Nerd alert. He's running for the top job in St. Louis County, but who is Jake Zimmerman? And will cost-weary voters elect a tax man during a budget crunch? Plus, we check the record 5 years after January 6. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. This week, a federal immigration operation turned deadly in Minneapolis after an ICE officer shot and killed Renee Good. She was a 37-year-old mother of 3. Her death setting off protests and putting Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at the center of a political and legal firestorm as state and local leaders disputed her account and were shut out of the ongoing investigation. Now, Democrats in Congress are calling to impeach Noem. Illinois Congresswoman Robin Kelly filed articles of impeachment accusing Noem of, quote, turning ICE into a rogue force. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, running against Kelly in the Illinois Senate race, said, "I'll be your first co-sponsor." Let's turn now to Illinois Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. She is on the record. Congresswoman, if Democrats retake the House this year, should they impeach Kristi Noem?
Look, I think this is a woman that shouldn't be in this position. I would support an impeachment proceeding. As you know, my colleague, Congresswoman Robin Kelly from Illinois, has initiated that. So we'll see how that plays out, but I would be supportive.
Of course, Republicans hold the agenda while they hold the gavel, so that would probably be something that would only advance if Democrats won. President Trump, along those lines, told House Republicans this week that if Democrats win, they would impeach him too. From your perspective, is that on the table?
Well, look, I think we had a motion before the holidays to a motion to impeach and move forward. I ended up voting not to table the motion. I said it's something we should be looking into. I think that this administration has demonstrated that it believes it is above the rule of law. On a number of different occasions, in which you see the tragedy of what happened in Minneapolis just yesterday with ICE agents being weaponized against our communities, to the freezing of federal dollars that have already been appropriated through Congress. This administration has done that. What you saw in Venezuela that just happened at the turn of the new year, where this administration decided to strike without any authorization from Congress. I think these are really big questions that we need to be confronting, and we need to be looking at this.
You mentioned Venezuela. In June 2020, he was still a candidate then. Joe Biden tweeted, quote, "Trump talks tough on Venezuela, but admires thugs like dictators and Nicolas Maduro." As president, Biden said at the time, quote, "I will stand with the Venezuelan people and for democracy." After that, we know President Trump in 2020 had already put a $15 million bounty out for Maduro's arrest. President Biden upped the ante to $25 million. Clearly, the American government in both parties wanted this guy in custody. Are you glad Nicolas Maduro is in American custody today?
Yeah, look, I think we can all agree that Maduro is a thug, that Maduro is not a legitimately democratically elected leader of Venezuela, and the fact that he's gone is a good thing. But what the bigger issue in play here is how this administration conducted this strike, the complete lack of transparency that this administration provided or did not provide to Congress, and then what's next? The president has now said that we're in full control of Venezuela. I think that the district that I represent, we don't want foreign wars. We want a president that's focused on the people at home. And one of the things I've been so focused on is healthcare. How are we maintaining affordable healthcare in this country? We have a vote, as you know, this week on extending the ACA premium tax credit, something we've been as Democrats fighting for many, many months. That's what our constituents, my constituents in the 13th district, want to see this president focused on, but instead he's focused on issues that are in other countries, and we need to bring that focus back home.
Speaking of back home, let's talk about affordability and prices. We had you on about a month ago when you were promoting the healthcare action plan from the new Democrat Coalition Healthcare Working Group. Now the House appears to be going in a different direction, moving to simply extend the Affordable Care Act's tax credits that were expanded during COVID. Hasn't the Senate already rejected that offer? Why advance this plan and not yours?
Well, let me say the extending the ACA premium tax credits are a part of the New Dems healthcare policy plan that we discussed last year, but just one part of it. I think we need to do a lot more. And what you'd see in that plan is how we're going to streamline and make prescription drugs more affordable, how we're going to make sure we're protecting rural hospitals and repairing the damage that this administration has done to Medicaid. So I think this week is positive progress. It's not a one and done kind of thing. But I do think that we're going to be voting and passing out of the House of Representatives a 3-year extension on the ACA premium tax credits. When we do that, I am urging my Senate counterparts to immediately take action. As you know, Mark, the ACA premium tax credits expired at the end of December, on December 31st of 2025. Working people cannot wait any longer. They are making very difficult decisions as it relates to their health care. This is just the first step in the right direction that Democrats have demanded for many, many months.
That's the bill that many people will get in the mail. Let's talk about the cost that they'll have at the checkout counter. You sent a letter to Dollar General and a Family
Yes.
Dollar accusing them of systemic overcharging. You cited this report that found 6,400 or so failed price inspections in the last 4 or 5 years. Help our viewers understand the leap you're making here. What evidence do you have that these pricing errors are intentional or systemic corporate behavior and not just some breakdown or compliance failure at the store level?
I believe this is deceptive pricing from a corporation, Family Dollar and Dollar General, that prides itself, sells itself, markets itself to consumers, that they're an affordable option. What The Guardian actually did an investigative piece, that's how this matter came to my office's attention, exposed the fact that these corporations were actually charging different prices within their own store. A lower price on the shelf, and then when customers were going to be rung up at the register, a higher price. And then when a customer, if they were actually able to delineate and see that higher price, brought it to the company's attention, the company refuses to honor the lower price that they have on their shelf. You know, right now when people are struggling to make ends meet, grocery prices, utility bills, healthcare bills, all of these things are mounting up. I think corporations need to be acting responsibly, and that includes Family Dollar and Dollar General, to honor the lower prices that they market themselves to be providing to customers. That's all we're asking. And it's why I led a letter with 29 other colleagues demanding answers from these two companies as to why they're engaging in these deceptive pricing.
Of course, shoppers want to know they're getting a fair deal. This is slightly different, but there are some grocery stores that have sort of tinkered with this dynamic pricing where they can have one product on their shelf at 10 in the morning that costs $5. The same product might cost $7 later in the day. What kind of enforcement power does Congress actually have to make sure that these stores are holding up their end of the bargain that they've marketed to customers?
Yeah, well, we need to work with the Federal Trade Commission to make sure that there are enforcement mechanisms. One of the things that I learned in investigating these cases at Family Dollar and Dollar General is a very uneven playing field as it relates to each state has its own different approach. My home state of Illinois does not necessarily have the same enforcement mechanism that other Midwestern states like the state of Missouri might have. That's why I believe that depending on what information we get back from Family Dollar and Dollar General, they've yet to respond to our letter. We might be looking at federal legislation to make sure that that playing field is level for all working families in this country when it relates to corporations and pricing, and making sure that these corporations are honoring the lower price that they are marketing to customers.
In your letter, you and some of your colleagues argue that these pricing errors can disproportionately hurt low-income or rural communities, especially where Dollar General or Family Dollar may be the only option. Can you point to any documented cases where customers were ultimately made whole, where fines or violations were issued, or where corporate practices might have changed as a result of pressure like this from Congress?
Well, not in the state of Illinois, and that's the issue, is that every state has seen some different levels of restitution when cases have been taken with state attorney generals. And so what we're looking for is, again, more of an equal level playing field across all states that provides enforcement mechanisms to make sure that customers are protected from corporations that might be engaging in deceptive pricing. I think that's what we have. You can see in the investigative piece in The Guardian, there are a number of states in the Midwest, Ohio, was one of them that was called out, that there have been specific cases and then cases that have been brought to court. What we want is to be able to empower the customer, the consumer, to be able to have a voice in these matters when very profitable corporations might be taking advantage of them.
All right, Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
We're back in a moment. Donald Trump is turning on one of his own, saying Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, quote, should never be elected to office again. All this after Hawley voted to rein in the president's war powers in Venezuela. Trump blasted Hawley and 4 other Republicans for backing the resolution. Trump called it, quote, stupidity, insisting the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. Hawley pushed back, saying, my read of the Constitution is that if the president wants to put boots on the ground, Congress needs to vote on it. With a likely 2028 presidential run looming, Hawley's staking out a clear anti-war lane, breaking with Trump, maybe betting Republican voters still care who gets to declare war. Missouri lawmakers are back to work in Jefferson City, debating how much you'll pay in taxes. Republicans plan to phase the current 4.7% income tax out completely. Democrats warn that will undoubtedly result in paying more at the cash register.
Our state cannot operate without revenues being collected in the form of taxes. We simply cannot. We cannot cut enough spending to function as a state.
Well, the reason for getting rid of the income tax would be to grow revenue. No one is saying that we're going to get out of paying taxes. You're going to have to pay taxes at some point. The question is, are income taxes the best and most efficient way to collect the revenue necessary to run the state?
Democrats say they'll roll out their plan to raise income taxes on people who make more than $250,000 a year and cut income taxes for workers in the middle and lower income tax brackets next week. A self-described nerd running to replace Sam Page. Jake Zimmerman in studio next. Welcome back. Sam Page bowed out. That means the race for the top job in St. Louis County is an open seat. Do voters want a nerd in that role? That's not my word. It's his. St. Louis County Assessor Jake Zimmerman launched his campaign with a video here saying, I may not be flashy, I may not be the coolest guy on earth, but what St. Louis County needs right now is real leadership to get back to basics, not another slick politician. Good to have you with us now in studio. Jake Zimmerman on the record.
Thanks so much, Mark.
In this launch video, you called Sam Page, quote, the picture of political dysfunction. But you didn't announce your bid to run until after he bowed out. Were you planning to run against him?
You know, I don't make my political decisions based on what any other politician does, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that this was an easy choice. I had a long talk with my family, what my wife Megan and what my son Gabriel think means a lot to me. And this is a hard thing. It's a big hill to climb. But I'll tell you what, this moment is a rough one. St. Louis County government is in trouble, and I think it's time.
I'm going to infer from that maybe you might have run against him because you weren't going to decide based on what he did. I'll leave that to speak for itself. You talk in your launch video about making life more affordable in St. Louis County. But for 15 years, you've been the tax man in the property assessment office and presiding over a region where property taxes have consistently, for the large part, gone up. Why should voters trust you to make their lives more affordable?
Because what I've demonstrated doing the hardest job in St. Louis County, right? When the assessor tells you that your house has gone up in value, that's not happy news. Right now, when your real estate agent tells you the house went up in value, that's great news. But oftentimes, nobody likes to hear me at their doorstep.
So you'll tell tough news when people need to hear it.
That's exactly right.
Here's some tough news. The county has a big budget hole. How are you going to fill it?
$80 million.
You're going to fill it with internet sales taxes?
I think taxes should always be the last resort, and there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in county government right now. But I'm open to all possibilities, and what I'll say is this. What we need right now is serious leadership, and what we don't need is politicians yelling at each other.
Would you have signed the budget the county council just passed?
I have concerns about the budget proposal. I don't like the idea of spending one-time money like the Rams money in the way that was proposed by the county executive. That feels to me a little bit like burning the furniture in order to try and keep warm. But let me say this more fundamentally. This $80 million budget hole, if you go back a few years, it wasn't that big. It was 10 million, it was 20 million. But the politicians were so busy bickering, so busy yelling at each other, that nobody sat down to work on this. It's time to get serious.
So tax hikes a last resort, but not off the table.
I think we need to talk to the people of St. Louis County about what they want out of their county government, and we'll figure it out from there.
This is now a two-man race. The field could grow larger yet. Well, in the primary at least. Dennis Hancock, a Republican, also wants the job. But the campaign for Brian Williams is already responding to you jumping into the race, saying, quote, St. Louis County is facing a real affordability challenge, and taxpayers want fresh leadership focused on solutions, not the past. This will be your 10th campaign in 20 years. Do you see that experience as an asset, or do you fear voters might see it as a liability?
I think what people should ask themselves is, do you want to put someone in charge of St. Louis County government with zero experience running anything? Now, here's the thing about me. The county assessor is not the coolest guy in town, right? Nobody's thrilled to see the county assessor's face unless you're totally nuts.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
But, well, hey, I am what I am, like Popeye said. But look, Mark, I have a record. While Steve Stenger was being hauled off to federal prison, you've never once heard anybody say that my office was run with anything other than honesty and integrity. And isn't that what we need right now?
You are running on a platform that promises, quote, no drama, no headlines, just results. As a reporter, I'm not sure I can go along with your no headlines part. We're going to see if we can challenge you on that. But if you are running as the quote unquote boring candidate, the anti-Sam Page candidate, what do voters actually take away from that? Beyond just the buzzwords there, what's something tangible that you know you could deliver voters if you were elected?
Fixing broken messes. Look at all the stuff that is wrong with St. Louis County government right now. Look at an animal shelter that fired the volunteers.
You're going to keep that in county government, or are you going to outsource that?
I'm open to any possibility that fixes the mess there, but I'll tell you one thing that's crazy. When you're $80 million in the hole, maybe you should think twice before you fire volunteers who want to help out of the goodness of their heart. And I could name you dozens of other examples like that. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. Here's what we don't need. What we don't need is any more politicians yelling at each other, any more bickering, any more of this clownish junior high school behavior that we've seen. No more fistfights in the hallways. Let's get down to business. Let's get to work.
All right, Assessor Zimmerman, running to be St. Louis County Executive. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Where were you when a mob stormed the Capitol 5 years ago? The fight for control of that narrative collides with cold, hard facts. Next. We often say news is the first rough draft of history, but over time, the record becomes more clear, or it should, as new information becomes available, as new context comes to light, as data sets become complete, and scholars can test claims against all the evidence in the record. And when crimes are alleged, the system is built to even slow down on purpose. Indictments, rules of evidence, judges, juries, appeals, all of it designed to separate assertion from proof before something is formally entered into the final record. And in moments of real political consequence, we add even another layer: congressional hearings, subpoenas, testimony under oath, penalties for lying. We even impeached a president once for lying under oath before a federal grand jury. So after a week where we saw powerful voices marking the 5th anniversary of January 6th, recycling a familiar set of alternative facts, let's check the record to remember what actually survived all those layers of scrutiny. Terry, who in her social media pages proclaims that COVID was a scam, writes me online encouraging me to enlighten myself. To do so, she shares a link to an official website published by the White House. It curiously includes incomplete, inflammatory, and misleading politically charged rhetoric, claims that were not made in criminal courts. They claim police were to blame for all the violence. The record shows hundreds of defendants admitted under oath to assaulting officers, smashing windows, and forcing their way inside. They claim on that White House website January 6 defendants were innocent victims, unfair, targeted in political persecution. The record shows judges accepted guilty pleas where, in their own words, they confessed things that undermine and debunk that very defense. They claim on the White House website the president acted swiftly to stop the chaos. The record shows a well-documented hours-long delay where Trump did not call off the mob while the Capitol was still under siege, even as his own son was texting his then chief of staff, urging him to do so. Judges appointed by both presidents by presidents of both parties reached the same conclusion. This was not a peaceful protest. This was not a tourist visit. This was an intentional, coordinated effort to stop the lawful, peaceful transfer of power. That history will never change just because it makes someone uncomfortable. The job of a journalist is not to pander to delusion, to coddle the bruised egos of powerful men, or to wink and nod at authority's ever-expanding demand for more of it. As famous journalist Walter Lippmann put it, there is no higher law in journalism than to tell the truth and shame the devil. Whether the devil ever feels that shame, that's another question entirely. Until next time, we're off the record.